Welcome to Performance Talk with your hosts, Yul Gordon and Chris Costa, where professionals discuss the latest news and developments in the profession and all areas that affect sports performance, strength and conditioning, nutrition, recovery, performance, and much more. Listen now to your host and this week's guest, next on Performance Talk.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Performance Talk. We'd like to welcome you to our 8th season, and we are happy to get going. We got a lot of new things going on this year, this season, so we're looking forward to a great season here for 2025. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Everybody knows my partner, Chris Costa. We're both back here for 2025. Chris, you want to introduce Ian? No? Our guest today, I put him on the spot with that one, but we do that sometime. We like to have a little fun. Our guest today is Ian Wright. Ian, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing and what you have going on.
Yeah. So I'm currently based in Hawaii. I serve as the medical director for the 15th Medical Group. So basically, I'm in charge orthopedically of our airmen, so for the Air Force. So I weigh in terms of their readiness, how capable they are to deploy, things like that. And really I serve with regards to all aspects of getting them ready and into the fight when that occurs, not if.
Okay. So so we're talking a little bit about let me just ask you like this. So what's your background in as far as your readiness? You said you're a physical therapist, you're CSCS.
Yeah, so I mean, those are just letters by a name. So
Right.
I graduated with my doctorate in 2018 from Ohio University. I did my bachelor's at Ohio State.
Right.
Like most PTs, got it in exercise science, kinesiology, whatever you want to call it. I've before I was a PT, I was a strength and conditioning coach. My last job out in Texas before I moved out to Hawaii, I actually built a bridge program where essentially I got to combine my strength and conditioning background with my rehab background. I'd have crazy classes of like 3 or 4 ACL participants with a rotator cuff repair, with OCD, osteochondral defect in like a knee or elbow. So I would have these large classes where essentially, these kids weren't ready to go back to sport, but they couldn't stay in rehab. So it was really my job to kind of use all my knowledge and background to get them back to sport in a pretty large group setting. I'd have classes up to 20. In my current role, I still use some of that. Obviously, we got about 10,000 airmen here in Hawaii.
Right.
So my staff currently that I lead, I only have a staff of 6. So just do the math. So we're doing classes, whether it's low back classes, reconditioning classes, whatever as well. So kind of really been using both of my backgrounds to really hopefully try to either get kids or in this case our airmen back into sport or into the fight respectively.
Right. We talk a lot, on this show about the profession and about the differences in the profession between dealing with first responders and our tactical side and sport, and what the similarities and some of the differences are. So explain to our audience who are professionals like yourself, sprinkled out throughout the program, and athletes and parents of athletes. Explain the difference in what you do now as opposed to the athletic challenge.
Yeah. So, not all military or first responders are the same, right? So depending on what they actually do, so how I treat my intel people, right, is very different than, for example, how I treat my TAC Ps, right, up in the 25th base ops at this point, right? Those are the guys calling in airstrikes, right? They have to ruck with 100 pounds on their back 12 plus miles. You know,
Right.
they got to do some crazy things, right? Versus the dude behind a computer that's, you know, flying a drone or whatever.
Right.
So, you know, it first starts, you know, with what is the goal? What is their occupation, right? And same thing with an athlete, right? If I'm treating a D lineman, an O lineman, that's very different than me treating a soccer player, right? So it always comes back to, you know, what is the demand of either your sport or what is the
Right.
demand of your occupation, right? So realizing what that is, what that entails, and you know, the best way to do that, you know, if you're a coach or you're a strength and conditioning coach, you know, on the rehab side of things is go observe, right? Go watch them play. Go watch the team, or in my case, you know, I'll go do outreach with the 19th and 119th fighter group, right? And I'll see what their jets look like, right? For my TAC-Ps, I'll go up to their facility and see what that looks like. You need to understand that first and foremost, and then you could kind of work backwards in terms of deconstructing what those demands are and how you're going to meet that person where they're at to get to where they need to be.
Those different demands. We talk about that in sport a lot. I have a little bit of history in the military. As I retired, and I did some of this work there before it became the TSAC-F. Let's talk about all the requirements to get to deal with the military now versus when I came through. I had been training soldiers and airmen and you know, Marines for 20 years. And then all of a sudden they're dropped a certification on there. I have the CSCS, but talk about the profession and how we need to kind of, you know, get that screwed down so that everybody understands what the difference is between the certifications and the hierarchy of the certification, if you have any opinion on that.
You know, and I'm going to speak broadly here.
Yeah, that's fine.
it- Certifications are great, right? But at the end of the day, you know, let's just take my PT background, right? I have my SCS, my sports certified specialist, and my OCS, so orthopedic clinical specialist.
Right.
And those are board certifications that say, hey, you want above and beyond. But at the end of the day, your patients or your kids you're coaching or whatever, they don't know what that means. The only people that know what that mean is in that case other PTs, right?
Right.
And that's great because you always want to learn and grow and learn, you know, enhance your knowledge as you progress in your career. But from you know, even if we look at the strength and conditioning side of things, whether it's CPSS or CSCS, you know, TSAC-F or whatever, right? CPT, the only people that know what that is other coaches, right? And that's great if you're trying to get a job,
Right.
you know, because some of those rate limiting credentials you need to get a job, right? You need your CSCS, generally speaking, if you're trying to coach at the collegiate, NFL level, whatever, right?
Right.
Just like you generally need your SCS if you're trying to be a rehab professional at those levels as well. But the only people that know that are people within the profession. You know, your coach it, your kids or your airmen or whatever. They don't know what that means, and they don't care what
Right.
that means.
And they
They care
really,
about the results you can give them.
I really agree with you on that. What I'm kind of guiding you to is the profession and where does the profession need to be in educating the hiring elements of where you may get hired, because a coach may like you, but
Yeah, you know,
but the AD doesn't know what the what everything means. You know what I'm saying?
yeah. So I mean, from a strength and conditioning perspective, I think we really got to get away from like, hey, new coach, get rid of all those other elements that were in place, right? Whether it's rehab,
Right.
the strength and conditioning, just because I know a guy, right? Those credentials are supposed to give you some credit towards like, hey, I'm a professional, I know what I'm talking about, right? Think about how insane it would be if the commander of my med group, they change out every 2 years. I'm sure you know
Right.
that.
Right.
If they're like, hey, we're getting rid of all PTs, ATs, all of our med group people, PCMs, because I want to bring in my own people. And that happened every 2 years, right? You see that all the time
Yep.
in strength and conditioning, where even if you did a good job and, someone knows a guy, a coach knows a guy, they're going to bring that guy in over you, right? And as a profession, generally speaking, strength conditioning, you're the lowest man on a totem pole. So there's not much you can do about that.
Yeah, from that perspective, I had a discussion with another professional, and his point was we don't work for the sport coach,
No.
but oftentimes that's how the hierarchy is set up within certain organizations where they put you under the sport coach, and so how do you? You're in a more unique situation because the military has a chain of command, and like you said, that rotates out every 2 to 4 years, and you don't really move.
No.
But you're expected to do a job to a certain standard, and that's what you're graded on, which is a great way to do it. Um, I lived in that system for a lot of years, but by the same token, when we're talking about um being professional and understanding where you are versus where the profession is, how do you kind of reconcile that? And you started down that road a little bit with I'm gonna let you go a little further, just how you reconcile that.
Yeah. So, part of the reason I became a PT is I recognize that there is no job security in strength and conditioning, right? Love the field. I mean, absolutely love it. But
Right.
there was an old Elite FTS seminar I used to go to when I was living in Ohio, and I think it was Joe Ken who said it's not a question of if you get fired, it's when, right? Especially when we're talking at the college or pro ranks. And as a profession, you need to realize that because, yes, we don't work for the sport coach, but even myself as a rehab professional, we're adjuncts, right? We're adjuncts really towards that coach, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're working for an organization, the goal is to win, right? So as a rehab, as a clinician, my job is to get players or airmen back into the game. As a strength and
Right.
conditioning coach, hopefully you're getting players bigger, faster, stronger, but I would like to see a pivot more towards skill development as well, right? I think if you can develop players and do some of the things that maybe skill coaches do, you give yourself a little bit more leverage in terms of, hey, I'm more valuable. You shouldn't get rid of me because, I can teach young players, up and coming players how to do X, Y, or Z better, right? Versus just tracking weight room stats or, you know, force plate stats, whatever, right? So ultimately, I think the more of a niche you can develop, probably the probably the more job security you're going to have. But at the end of the day, the way strength conditioning is built right now, I think it's important to recognize that, like I said earlier, you are the lowest man on the totem pole.
Yeah.
It's very much just a favoritism game, even if you're really good at what you do.
Well, that's while while I agree with you, probably 85% of that, which means I agree with you. Uh, being the lowest man on the totem pole, uh, when you come out of college is in every profession. The problem is with strength conditioning coaches is how you're viewed all the time. And if it's as the lowest man on the totem pole, I've seen some guys at the professional level in the NFL and NBA get treated like, you know, they were secondhand, second tier coaching that, just, you're the get back coach now, or you're the towel coach. You handle the trainers. Hold on. That's not my profession. That's not why I went to school. We don't always, um, Chris and I don't subscribe to, um, the the approach that we are less than as far as that goes. So you took the path of physical therapy instead of a straight strength coach, and the biggest reason is what I wanted you to talk about a little bit, and you did. The biggest reason was because you didn't see a path. So how do you see the path for physical therapy? How has that been different from your perspective?
I want to say I didn't see a path. Like my entire job before I came to Hawaii, I would see about 400 athletes a month in terms of the program I built. And that was reliant, 50-50 strength and conditioning and rehab. Right now, I'm doing definitely more rehab. The path forward is clear in my mind for strength and conditioning. Even if you're at a high level, right? Whether it's a private high school, a college, pro, whatever, is work for yourself as well. That way, like I said, if you do get rolled up in a coaching staff change, you still have that reputation that you worked for XYZ team, but then you have again a whole nother side of things where you're developing athletes that no one is the boss of but you, right? That's part of the reason I started a continuing education company as well. You should never fall into the trap where your identity is solely based off of the job you have at whatever moment we're talking about, right? Do I identify just as a clinician? No. Do I identify just as a strength and conditioning coach? Absolutely not, because I really do both of them each and every day. Um, but I think that's part of it is realizing that don't let someone else define your value or your worth or really who you are as a person, right? Strength and conditioning is part of it, but if you're a good strength and conditioning coach, I think we all know here, that means you're a good communicator. That means you're good at getting buy-in, right? You have a lot of those intangible skills where you are a leader essentially, right? So if you're going to lead, you can lead in any capacity, right, from anywhere. And I think that's important for a lot of young coaches to really understand that, we all like to chase titles in society, but at the end of the day, that's temporary, right? Titles are going to change.
Right. The importance of education and continuing education to you.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
What is the importance of education and continuing education to you, and how you feel about it for your career / what you do?
You know, I'm one of those people where I want to be the best at whatever I do, right? I don't want to be Joe Schmo. Um, so if I'm not learning, if I'm not growing, if I'm not pushing the envelope, why am I here, right? Ultimately, I've had the opportunity to build different programs, like I've alluded to earlier. But I like to teach, right? I like to see everyone grow together. The thing I hate the most is where I just see incompetence, or people trying to collect a paycheck. I just can't stand it. And if I ever became that way, it's time for me to hang it up, so to speak. So that's why I always try to learn throughout the years, right? Whether it's getting new certifications, whether it's developing new products, being uncomfortable, right? Chasing those higher level titles into different leadership roles, right? Because ultimately those experiences I can use in different capacities, right? Whether it's for my own company or if it's for something later in life that I'm trying to set myself up for.
Okay, so let's talk about tell us about your company. I mean, you've mentioned it a couple of times now. Tell us, give us the lowdown on it.
Yeah, so it's Competitive Advantage Athletics, CAA LLC, and really the ideal came from my last job where I was merging a school with a hospital I worked with. I was doing that crazy bridge program where I had, different athletes that were injured at different rates, right? I would have like a 3-month ACL in there with a 9-month with, again, like a meniscal tear, OCD, elbow, an elbow surgery, rotator cuff repair, whatever. Like I had these crazy classes. And I realized pretty quickly it wasn't normal, right? A lot of people could not do what I was doing, especially as I was interviewing candidates to to take my job when I relocated to Hawaii. So the idea came out of, well, how do I teach this, right? How do I teach a skill to strength and conditioning coaches or clinicians where, that's a job opportunity that really makes you more marketable. I've actually seen a few different job positions now at some major hospitals for those bridge positions, right? So what I did is I took a hypothetical ACL patient and I take you through post-op day one through return to performance, try to teach you everything in between where, I'm trying to really build the toolboxes of different coaches and clinicians. Because as we all know here, your training program, your rehab program, it's a suggestion, right? It's an outline. People come in with different pain levels, and or they slept poorly because of tests or whatever, and you have to pivot, right? We never ever just follow the program to a T, right? That's maybe what more novice clinicians or coaches do. So the idea was, hey, let me teach you everything from both sides, and then hopefully, more people can enter into those hybrid roles, right? Because really, whether you're a strength and conditioning coach or a clinician, we all lie on a continuum, right? Maybe I see the patients first, get their range of motion back, blah, blah, blah. But there's no reason a strength and conditioning coach can't come in fairly early. I would argue, you know, 3 months into an ACL and take that patient or that athlete from there and progress them back to return to performance, right? If they have the knowledge. So that was really where the program came from. Is trying to open more job opportunities not only to coaches but also clinicians, kind of those hybrid roles.
Okay, so that's really, I'm sitting here listening to you, and as you're talking, I'm thinking how many places that I know of, and there's probably a dozen right here just in my area, hospitals and clinics that deal with sports medicine within a 200-mile radius
Yep.
that could use that person.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what, and that bank of knowledge that you're offering would be could be a critical step into taking someone's clinic or shop from one level to the next level. So how do you you gave us did you give us the website for that, or how does someone get in touch with you? I take it it's online, right? You can do this.
Yeah, it's online. I try to make it as applied as I could because, personally, I hate when I take courses and it's just reading and it's just
Right.
knowledge based, right?
Right.
If you can't apply what you learned, what is the point, right? So, the website is Competitive Advantage Athletics. I could always send you guys a link to.
Yeah.
I'm sure we could put a description or something. But it's I try to put all my knowledge from really both of my careers into that program and teach people how to bridge that gap, right? That was the point, and that's what I did in my last job, and I think it's a vital skill, right? Even right now with some of the clinicians that I oversee, if I'm being honest, yeah, you have a doctorate, but I see a lot of low level things, right? Where you get people back to ADLs, and kind of lifting weights, but a lot of clinicians don't know how to get people back to cutting and pivoting and running and things like
Right.
that, unless if you were maybe taught that by either a really good clinical instructor on your rotations as a student or by a strength and conditioning coach, right?
Right.
So earlier we were talking about, hey, how do you get people to progress in their strength and conditioning career? Well, take students, take PT students, take AT students. Yes, they got a lot of knowledge from school, but again, from the applied perspective of things, I see a lot of deficits in these clinicians. And just because you have a doctorate, that doesn't mean anything, right? That's a minimal credential, right? You need that in order to practice PT nowadays, right? You need your doctorate. Period. End of story. That doesn't make you a great clinician. It's
Yeah.
the minimum you need.
I think one of the things that we fall victim to is a lot of times looking at the education level in strength conditioning or in PT or in wherever whatever profession we're in, and saying, "Oh, that person is an expert."
Yeah.
Well, knowledge level possibly. At the applied level, usually not.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
what that usually and what that PhD does is let outside people know, hey, they have a high level of learning and they should be capable of helping you. And that gives them a place to start to kind of make a decision on what clinic to go to, what program to take, or whatever. But then after that, it's all about relationships.
Yep.
And I know where you are right now, on the tactical side of rehab and all this, that relationships can be difficult to build because they're on a rotational basis. And so the important place to put your relationship building skill is with your team, because they're going to help you when everybody rotates out and the next group comes in. They're going to be the ones that spread out and then push your message forward. How do you approach that?
Yeah. So couple of different ways, right? First and foremost, each patient I treat, I try to treat them as if, they're a commander, right? I treat everyone the best I can because you don't know who you're treating, right? I've treated a lot of people who have hooked me up with other people, like you said, because of the relationships they've had, who are commanders, who then, once you get your foot in the door, you can do things like manual clinics, show your different group classes that you offer, things like that. And that can give you opportunities that you wouldn't have elsewhere, right? The other things is, respect each branch of the military. So, we're on an island, right? So, the other chiefs of PT, we usually meet on a monthly basis. And, we recognize we're on one team, right? So,
Right.
Army for the last 6 months has been helping me and actually loaning me some technicians in order to see more patients, right, and make sure that again we can get our people ready. So, treating everyone with respect and really just communicating your needs, right? So, that's an opportunity. If I was just like, hey, I'm Air Force, I don't want to listen to you or communicate with you, wouldn't have happened. Um, the third thing is, again, developing your skills, right? So part of the reason you take continuing education courses isn't hopefully just to get CEUs. It's to actually develop a new skill set, right? So from the rehab side of things, we're offering different, like I said, manual clinics where maybe we do different OMTs, thrust-like techniques in order to see more patients, dry needling type of clinics, things like that, that actually, get other airmen telling their friends about the services we offer, get people excited, get them in the door, and then we can tell them about our other services more from the strength and conditioning side of things. And don't discredit the strength and conditioning side of things. Our PTLs that really run the fitness tests, the group classes that we've really conducted, they're starting to learn them so that they can train, their 4,000 airmen now as well and kind of become little mini strength and conditioning coaches. So again, it's just treating everyone with respect because you don't know who they know, right? When I first started off, this was my first job in the military. I had no idea what ranks meant, right? I had no idea what being a commander meant.
Mhm.
So half the time I was talking to like a colonel who was commander and I had no idea. I was just like, you're just a regular person to me and I'm going to treat you like I do everyone else. And then um, they would kind of show me, hey, I want you to meet X, Y, and Z. And that relationship would blossom. And that's how a lot of this outreach happened.
Well, I will tell you that there's two ways to in the military to make sure that you always earn some respect. That's one, be yourself. That's also, and then the other way is to always be respectful. Yeah, and you've mentioned that over and over. The biggest thing, and you hear it a lot nowadays. A lot of people give it lip service, but the the private gets the same respect from me as the general.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because one thing I told and I knew I had a subordinate in the military that ended up being a multimillionaire once he got out of the military, but he hated a particular supervisor that he had. And then that guy was looking for a job and he didn't hire him. But that was because of the non-relationship that they formed, 15 years prior.
Yep.
So those kind of things do count on the outside world, in the military, and in our profession that we both currently are in right now. So
yeah, and the third thing I would say too is be really good at what you do, right? People are going to come back if you're really good, right? If you're just giving them, like you said, lip service, I mean, they know like, hey, I didn't get value out of, that appointment or that training session or whatever. And just think about if that happened to you, why would you come back, right?
right.
So, when I coach, I'm giving them value of maybe things they've never done before, right? So from a clinician, I know you can't try to know yourself, right? I know you probably can't do a thrust technique to yourself, right? Chances are I'm going to do that for you because I immediately get buy-in, right? As a coach, I'm probably, I take a little different stance in terms of always doing the basics. I recognize they're the basics for a reason. Don't hear me wrong. But I'm going to show you some other things that maybe you've never done before because, again, if I can make things fun, still get the result I am seeking, I'm going to get buy-in. I'm going to get you excited to actually come see me versus the other way around of being, boring and just repetitive. And that, a lot of your airmen, especially, right, they're known as the chair of force for a reason, right? They don't necessarily want to be physically fit, right? So you need to make things fun, but still get that result, right? And still, challenge them appropriately. So I kind of think in those terms of how do I get you coming back? Because if I can't get you to consistently show up either for your rehab or training, it doesn't matter what I do, right? I'm not going to get the result I desire. I need to get you through the door first and foremost, and then we can have some good discussions.
Well, that's we'll continue down that one. It's taking a sedentary, well, I won't call them sedentary, but taking a more sedentary branch of the service and motivating them to move. What are some of the things that you do? Understanding, there's some individuals in the Air Force that are studs physically,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh, yeah.
I know that. But as a overall service, their jobs don't require them to be physical a lot in most cases. I hate to try to lump that in a thing because it's really not there. But if you break everything out, and you say, okay, what's the most physical group in our service? You'd say, the special operations and the infantry and the Army and the Marines, and you'd go a long way before you got to airmen and then the sailors because they're restricted on what they can do. So how do you motivate that person anyway?
Yeah. So, and you're not wrong, right? So my wife's in the Army. She's actually a surgeon, right? And her fitness test looks very different than my airman, right? She does the ACFT where, you know, med ball throws, right? Sprint track carries, trap bar deadlifts, right? Airman, basics, right? Mile and a half run, push ups, sit ups, planks, things like that, right? So very different training in terms of accomplishing those goals. So recognizing that. Now, in terms of motivating airmen and getting them to do that, part of it is I'm in a position where, if they can't deploy, right, or they need to be mobility restricted because they're a liability essentially if they did deploy, obviously, if it gets bad enough, or they can't hit their goals in about a year, we give them 12 months. They could be med boarded out of the military, right? Now, do we always play that card at the beginning? Obviously not, right? That's kind of like an ultimatum. In terms of really motivating them, it goes back to building the relationships. The commanders is what you have to get on board, right? You need to establish relationships with the commanders, whether it's intel, whatever. Because if they're on board, they're going to enact policies that reinforce what you're trying to do. If they're not on board, you need to go and try to get buy-in from each and every airman in that unit or squadron. So the short answer is get buy-in from the commanders, tell them what you're trying to do, tell them what you're seeing. So, a lot of times I can run different statistics for each group and see who's seeing me the most, right? Who is using the most medical, and then I can approach that commander, or someone in a leadership position, and say, "Hey, I'm noticing a trend. How do I help you keep your airmen, physically ready and in the fight, so to speak?" And then we have that discussion.
Okay. So let's move on to maybe what you see in the future of physical therapy as it combines and or melds with strength conditioning. So one of the areas I'd like you to touch on is that continuum that you discussed. Right now, it's going to be individualized, of course, because every person is different. But should there be a straw man for it, as far as a general outline for it, or is it something you do for each individual as the situation occurs?
It always depends on the resources available to run programs like that, right? So military, as you know, generally speaking, a lot of the money doesn't go to medical or to coaching, right? It goes to things like building planes, building bombs, right? Um, lethality, right? So you're always going to have a resource problem from a coaching or from, a medical perspective. So recognizing that, I've elected to go more general, and then if people aren't getting results, then become more specific, right? So like I said, we have running classes, we have low back pain classes, because that's a huge problem really in the military in general. And we have reconditioning classes that are tailored in this case towards our fitness test. If people aren't getting results, right? And when I say results, we do things like the InBody to measure body composition, things like that.
Right.
Obviously, we're tracking their times, through testing leading up to their actual fitness test. If we're not seeing results, then we can break up into more specific where, then I could kind of wear my dual hat and either become more of a coach or more of a clinician and try to get that person to hit their goals. So whether it's, to pass their fitness test or whether it's to achieve a certain, body composition, whatever the goal is, or, we have some lifters to hit, some of their lifting goals. I can do that, right? Or I could have someone in my team do that. But just due to the resource problem, we've elected to go from general to more specific versus specific to general.
Okay, which makes sense.
Yeah.
So how does what's the question I had? All right, so let's go from you're going from general to specific, and you're doing that with so I'm more interested in, well, I'm interested, and I won't say more. I'm interested in how you take the fitness test and break it down and then come back and train it from general to specific as far as individuals go. Do you have a lot of running issues? What's the issues you see as a coach, and what are the issues you see as a PT? As a coach, like, are there running issues? Is it a lot of joint stuff? Is it, soft tissue?
Yeah.
From, just that whole ball of wax. You know what can happen if you get an overuse injury or you're running a lot and stuff starts to break down.
Yeah, orthopedically, the biggest issues I see are overuse issues, right? A lot of people, they don't start training for their PT test or whatever till like a month out, which is going to predispose them to
Right.
issues such as plantar fasciitis, shin splints, different patellofemoral pain syndromes, things like that. You know, individuals that have been in the Air Force or military, for longer periods of times, generally speaking, they're going to have more low back pain than anything else. Different shoulder issues as well, whether it's like a tendinopathy, tenodesis type of thing. And in those people, you're training around those problems, right? So at a certain point as a professional, you have to have a conversation of, maybe you're not doing push-ups anymore. Maybe we need to do a variation of hand release push-ups. Or maybe you're not doing sit-ups anymore because you have a spondy, right? Maybe we need to do planks, or vice versa. Things like that, right? Or a disc pathology, you can't do a sit-up, you need to do a plank. So it's having those conversations and identifying, hey, what components of the test can they actually do, from an orthopedic perspective, and then let's train towards that versus putting everyone in this bucket of you have to do, run, sit-ups, push-ups, right? We have other options for that reason. Maybe these people with plantar fasciitis or patellofemoral pain syndromes, maybe they can't run a mile and a half, but they could do the hammer, which is essentially like a shuttle run, right? They can grit their teeth for 10 minutes and do that and be okay. So, having those difficult conversations of, hey, this is what's going on with you. This is where we're at from a medical standpoint, orthopedically, this is what I would recommend, and then training towards that, because at a certain point in life, you're not going to be able to do everything depending on your injury history and things like that. And, that's, kind of piggybacking off of what we talked about earlier. That's why these hybrid roles are important. So you can have those conversations and have that knowledge base to identify, hey, this pathology predisposes, this person to be able to do X, Y, or Z, right? Versus, like I said, just mandating everyone has to do this.
Being in the tactical space, you have, a receptive issue, and then how receptive are like certain levels of command to having others or subordinates not all do the same thing. Does that make sense? So I say a group comes in,
Yeah.
okay, we're doing our APFT today. Everybody generally lines up and goes through the process together. But if you got 5 other people who need to do special things, how receptive are you finding decision makers to that, like a group commander, a squadron commander, look, I need all my guys to do this or whatever the case is, because a lot of guys will get wrapped around, well, he does something different for our APFT, so he's not up to standard.
Yeah, generally speaking, where I'm at, people are pretty receptive. Not everyone, but, I would say ballpark percentage, 80% are receptive to like, hey, I'm okay with, everyone here doing this training plan, and then, maybe the NCO is taking that other group of individuals and doing a separate training plan. Now, ultimately, if we're going to have disagreements, which we can, medical and command, I can restrict them. Luckily, in terms of my position, and in terms of, hey, your person can do this, and there's really nothing you can do about it, because again, you're not going to overrule medical, right? Now, obviously, that's not forever, right? I don't want to write a 365 profile for everyone, but if you're having shin splints or something, like I could write you a 30-day profile of like running, right? Maybe you're walking, right, or you're doing some hip switch drills which aren't as impactful, things like that, right? Where medically we can restrict those people, where maybe command is, hey, my way or the highway type of things. But honestly, I don't have to do that often. Usually people are pretty trusting in terms of like, hey, medical says I can't do this, and they're like, okay, well, what can you do? And they work with them.
Now they're bringing on. I know across the bases and the forts and all the military installations, they're bringing on, um, you know, therapy folks who are well versed in sport, and strength conditioning coaches, and they're making a real effort, and they've made a real effort the last, let's say, 8 years to try to really put a point on health and fitness
Yeah.
in the services, because before it was health, okay, and fitness, this is what you do: push up, sit up, run, that's it. And then we don't care if we're measuring what we say we're going to measure. This is the test.
Yeah.
And that's the way it was in the old service. Now it's a little more give and take. So what are your opinions about and I know we've talked about it a little bit, about the APFT? Does it measure what it should measure? And as a therapist, what would you change? And as a strength coach, what would you change?
Yeah. So, I like it more than what we do for our airmen, right? Obviously, our TAC Ps, our people up in the ASOS, they do a very different PT test than what our regular airmen do, right? They're doing things like finning, rucking, trap bar deadlifts as well.
Okay.
It looks, more like the Army, but obviously, they're doing different swimming things for obvious reasons in terms of, they're going behind enemy lines, and, their job descriptions are changing where they're becoming more communications driven, right? They're setting up satellites, things like that, in order to
Right.
drop a bomb, right? Now for our airmen, I hate it. I get why the Air Force is resistant to changing it, because a lot of the Air Force, again, the job is to sit, right? Sit and do intel, whatever, fly a drone. But I think changing that fitness standard would change the culture of the Air Force as well, where there's no reason you can't do that job and still be fit and still be multi-capable, right? That's the big term people want to use now, because obviously if something's to break out, you need to be able to do more than just your job, because people are going to die. Like, that's just the way it is. So
Well, I learned one thing in my service time, and some old guys told me that when I wasn't the old guy. They said everybody in the military fights. Everybody's an infantryman. You could be a contractor. If you're in theater, you get a rifle.
Yep.
So it would behoove everybody in the service to get in the best type of shape they could get in. Not everybody's going to be able to run 6 miles.
No.
But you can be physically fit so that you can cover 6 miles. That's what I always told people. I said, you need to be able to cover 6 miles. I don't care how fast you run it.
Yeah.
But you need to be able to get there. Now, we'll figure out a plan to get everybody there. If I know I got a slower group of people, or people are moving slower, they're going first. So it's all about planning. So that you get out of here, you guys get out of here, and I'll bring my infantry guys and my fighters and my door kickers back last, because they're used to running and they're used to moving and they're the most physically fit. But the other guys are capable, which is what you were talking about earlier. They're capable, and that's what we want, a physically capable service. Let's talk about the lifestyle. I know in the past everybody used to say, "Oh, you're in the service. You're physically fit because all you guys do is work out and run." Well, they don't realize, like the Air Force, a lot of sitting is involved, a lot of waiting, and a lot of nothing. So, talk about the lifestyle in the service. And along with that, Do you work with nutritionists, psychologists, and those people when there's a need?
Yeah. So I'm part of the human performance flight, so we have nutrition, we have health promotion.
Okay.
Um, Obviously, I'll make referrals to mental health as needed as well. And that's part of the reason, we don't have it. We have OST, it's called, where it's a small group of people, usually a PT, strength coach, mental health, that can go out to different units, right, and kind of embed themselves to offer those services. Obviously, Army's doing something similar in terms of H2F, right, where they
Right.
have all those things and more, including things like athletic trainers.
Right.
And they actually just got to the island, I want to say like August time.
Really?
So yeah, so they finally made their way out to Hawaii here. So I think everyone recognizes like, hey, we need to get people up and really ready when something breaks out here. We need to make sure they are multi-capable, but also be able to do more than just the minimum, whether it's from a fitness perspective or whatever. So you asked me what I thought of like the ACFT for the Army. I like it. I like it in terms of right, a reverse med ball throw is like supposed to simulate, a buddy using their arms to boost someone up over a wall, right?
Okay.
Sprint drag carry. Obviously, if you get shot, you better be able to get your teammate to cover, right? Things like that.
Yeah.
So I like it in that perspective of I see the logic of how they're trying to get more specific to maybe, you know, on the battlefield, so to speak. Um, I think the Air Force should do more. I think OST is a good start. Why they're not doing programs like H2F that have shown pretty good data, things like, 40% reduction in injuries, which is pretty good. Uh, I think it's probably more budgetary reasons, but I think they should definitely, have more personnel, whether it's coaches, clinicians, in terms of, keeping people ready.
Okay. So as we think about where the profession is going, and you just touched on it, so that's a great segue. Um, Having more people ready is what you think the future should look like, and having more coaches and clinicians and folks like that. So in the macro, in the whole, tell me where you think the profession is right now and where it needs to go.
I think strength and conditioning you're asking more about right now, just to
I
clarify.
am asking more about your primary profession, which is rehab.
I think the profession, what makes rehab good is um, nothing standardized. And I mean, from a education perspective, what makes it bad is also nothing is standardized. So you got a lot of clinicians out there that know a lot about maybe different fields. So PT, you have vestibular, you have neuro, right? You have orthopedic, sports, acute care. The list goes on. If you threw me in one of those other settings like neuro, I mean, I'm going to look like an idiot. It's not what I do, right? If you throw me into sports orthopedics, I look pretty good. Now, if we look more at sports orthopedics, again, what I don't like is the curriculum is everywhere. The experiences are everywhere, right? How many, I like examples, right? I'll see people with an ACL 12 weeks out, no meniscal involvement. Their high level intervention is like a monster walk. It's like, what are you doing right now, right? Like this person it should be look like a weight room program, right? And that's because they don't know, right? Or maybe they do know and they don't know how to apply that. Just piggybacking off of what we talked about earlier. Um, so I really think, and I would challenge clinicians and coaches to to continue to grow and develop and push the envelope, right? Maybe find people that know more than you or have been there, done it, so to speak, and seek their mentorship, right? Versus just doing the basics, because you can build a career where you just do the basics and get paid. Because from a DHA perspective, which is the governing organization that a lot of PTs are under in the military, they view us all the same. They view us all as doctors, and they don't care about the quality of care you provide, right? Same with a lot of insurance companies. So when things aren't outcome driven and it's more, you get rewarded based off of productivity. So for example, if I seen, 2 or 3 patients at once and I just put them on a generic a program, a rehab program,
Right.
insurance companies, things like DHA reward that more than going one-on-one, individualizing it and making it outcome based, right? Making it, getting a better result quicker, and accomplishing that person's goals quicker, but still safely. They value, hey, productivity over results. And that needs to change, in my opinion, from a clinician rehab standpoint, right? Because that rewards mediocrity versus your high performers.
Agree. Well, listen, man, we could go on for forever and ever, because I'm listening to you, and you see me cut away real quick to write some stuff down, because I will research some things that you've said, basically because you piqued my interest, and I want to see if I can learn a little bit more about it. But I appreciate you taking the time and coming on the show and kind of letting us have a peek into your world and what you do from a multi-coach clinician standpoint on the tactical side, and kind of bringing that together for our audience. Chris, you got any questions for Ian?
Ian, I got one question for you.
Yeah.
What's the temperature in Hawaii right now?
82.
See, I was trying not to hurt my own feelings, so I wasn't going to ask you.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
I'd take that any day.
Yeah.
You want to take us out of here, Chris?
This has been Performance Talk with Ewell Gordon and Chris Costa. Today's guest was Ian Wright. We'll see you again real soon, guys.